Today, we are going to look at the most stupid ways people actually died, from a woman who tried to show off thinking she controls Mother Earth's unforgiving waters, to an influencer that got carbon monoxide poisoning after trying to do a DIY hot tub. Let's dive straight in. It was August 14th, 2018, in the coastal town of Pacifica, California. A warm, late morning with steady waves and light wind along the shoreline. Weekend crowds filled the beach, and a small local cable crew collected background footage for a lifestyle segment, wide shots of surfers, vendors, and swimmers moving in the water. One of the beachgoers was 42-year-old Melissa Davenport, familiar to regulars for her habit of correcting strangers and challenging staff. She worked as a freelance event planner, and neighbors said she often carried that assertive attitude everywhere she went. Weighing around 240 pounds, she used a wide, soft-top longboard for stability, since she wasn't an experienced surfer. Earlier that morning, witnesses said she was already paddling beyond the beginner zone, speaking loudly about how she understood the water better than the staff monitoring conditions. Regular surfers noted she'd been warned repeatedly about the breakwater currents on past visits, but she brushed off every caution as unnecessary advice meant for inexperienced riders. Lifeguards had issued early warnings about a strong side current pushing toward the old breakwater at the north end. One guard approached Melissa as she dragged her board toward the water, reminding her to stay within the main swim zone. Melissa immediately raised her voice, insisting the warnings were exaggerated and that she was not some beginner needing constant supervision. When the guard pointed out that her ankle leash was loose, she dismissed him, saying it felt restrictive and she would adjust it later. That looseness left extra slack in the cord, which later allowed the board to drift just far enough for the leash to snap tight with force. The cable crew's roaming camera briefly captured Melissa walking into the surf, while making comments to nearby swimmers about lifeguards power tripping. She paddled past the first breaking waves, continuing to talk loudly about how people exaggerate currents to scare tourists. The current pushed her steadily northward, but she ignored repeated gestures from the lifeguard tower to angle back toward the center. She tried to stand, but the front edge of her board dipped under the surface. The board tilted forward, and she fell off. Witnesses said she attempted to surface immediately, but the side current had already pushed her board toward the submerged rocks near the breakwater. According to several beachgoers, Melissa surfaced once, coughing, with her arms moving toward the board. As the current pushed the longboard into the rocks, the leash reached full tension. Witnesses said they saw her body jerk downward when the stretched leash pulled her underwater. People on the breakwater reported hearing her yell moments before the current rotated her sideways. A small retreating wave pulled her in the direction of the rocks again, and her head lifted above the water only briefly. Footage from the cable crew's distant camera later confirmed that the longboard had drifted into the breakwater, its nose catching on a submerged lip of stone. The board stayed wedged at an angle while the current continued to push water past it. A few seconds later, beachgoers closest to the breakwater reported hearing a single dull impact, consistent with her head striking one of the submerged stone surfaces beneath the chop. Lifeguards went in immediately, with one calling for backup as the other swam toward her. A brief lull in the current allowed them to pull her to shore, but she showed no movement when they lifted her above the waterline. CPR began right away, and beach staff cleared the area. EMTs arrived about 5 minutes after the emergency call and took over the resuscitation efforts, continuing CPR while assessing her condition. Their work lasted only a short time before they signaled to stop. Officials later confirmed that Melissa Davenport died from blunt head trauma, consistent with striking submerged rock after the tightened leash pulled her into the breakwater. Footage from the cable crew helped verify the sequence of events and her earlier disregard of warnings. The town later expanded its current zone markers and updated safety briefings, citing the case as a preventable incident. It was February 11th, 2018, in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Dayton, Ohio. The sky was gray, the air cool, and residents were casually setting up tables for the community garage sale. Most people sorted boxes slowly, greeting neighbors and arranging items along their driveways without hurry. One of the participants was 46-year-old Carla Madsen, a part-time home organizer known for treating the annual sale like a competition. Her job involved critiquing how people arranged their spaces, and neighbors said she often carried that same attitude into community events. She had already told several people she intended to run the best table this year after feeling overlooked at the last sale. So when she stepped outside and decided her driveway looked too dim, her irritation started immediately. Carla flung open her garage and dragged out plastic bins filled with old decorations and household items. When one neighbor mentioned that the lighting wouldn't matter until buyers arrived later, Carla snapped back and accused them of undermining her setup. She shifted her bins around sharply, reorganizing and reorganizing her tables while muttering complaints each time something wasn't perfectly aligned. Still unhappy, she decided the driveway needed extra lighting. Instead of buying new equipment, she pulled out a plastic storage bin filled with extension cords she had collected over the years, some frayed, some taped, and one with a several-inch strip of exposed copper wire. When a nearby resident gently suggested that a few cords looked unsafe, Carla raised her voice, insisting everything worked fine last year and refusing the offer of a spare cord. She stretched the cords across her driveway toward the outdoor outlet, but instead of laying them flat, she dragged an old metal shelving rack closer to keep them out of the walkway. The bottom of the rack was damp from overnight moisture, and several witnesses said they saw her shoving it back and forth hard enough that it scraped loudly across the concrete. One neighbor later recalled hearing her muttering angrily as she tried to wedge the cords behind it. By 9:35 a.m., 2 cords were already plugged in. The light stayed off because the final connection had not been made yet. Carla crouched down with the damaged cord, the one with the exposed copper, and braced her other hand firmly on the damp metal rack as she reached toward the outlet. A man standing on his porch directly across the street reported seeing a quick blue flash under the rack, followed by a sharp popping snap. The exposed wiring had come into contact with the wet metal surface, energizing the entire frame. Because Carla was leaning on it for support, the current traveled through the rack and directly into her body. The same witness said he saw her body go rigid before she dropped face first onto the concrete. Several residents on the block later reported a brief flicker of lights inside their homes at the same moment. People approached her driveway but stopped short, unsure if the rack or outlet was still live. Someone yelled to cut the breaker, and a neighbor ran into the garage to shut it off, sending the lights dark at once. Emergency responders arrived minutes later, and neighbors watched from the sidewalk as paramedics assessed her, though no one close by could hear the details. Inspectors later reviewed the cords, outlet, and shelving rack. They concluded that the exposed copper, the damp metal surface, and Carla's direct hand contact created a complete electrical path the moment she tried to connect the final cord. Officials confirmed that she died at the scene from cardiac arrest, caused by fatal electrocution consistent with household current under wet contact conditions. The next day, her family removed all the old electrical supplies from the garage and hired a professional to update the wiring and replace the outdoor outlet. It was May 3, 2017, in Mesa, Arizona, on a warm, clear afternoon. The grocery store's parking lot was busy, with carts moving between rows and cars shifting slowly through the front drive. Sun glare bounced off windshields, making it harder for drivers to see pedestrians stepping into the lane. One of the shoppers leaving the store was 42-year-old Dana Mullis, a medical billing clerk known in her neighborhood for arguing over small issues and demanding managers for minor problems. And that afternoon was no different. Witnesses said that inside the store she had already caused a scene over expired coupons, insisting the cashier honor them anyway, and asking for the manager twice. Several shoppers saw her leave the checkout line visibly frustrated. Dana walked toward her sedan parked in one of the closest spaces. At the same time, a compact car pulled into the stall beside hers, stopping slightly over the painted line. According to people loading groceries nearby, Dana noticed instantly and launched into complaints, waving her arms at the driver and demanding they fix how they parked. Those who witnessed it said she spoke loudly enough that several rows of shoppers turned to follow the scene. As the exchange continued, Dana stepped backward while still facing the compact car. Witnesses later said she made small, abrupt backward steps. More yelling, another step, more pointing, without looking behind her. The store's security camera showed that she moved into the drive lane at an angle, still engaged in the midst of the argument. At the same time, a pickup truck was turning through the lane toward the store exit at roughly 8 to 10 miles per hour. The driver later explained that a large SUV parked near the corner blocked his view of anyone walking out between the cars. As he turned, the truck's front fender cleared the blind spot just as Dana backed into the lane. Footage showed the driver hit the brakes immediately, but the distance was too short. The truck made contact with Dana at low speed. Witnesses estimated it looked similar to a parking lot bump, but because she was already leaning backward and unprepared, the impact spun her off balance. A shopper pushing a cart said she fell straight back, striking the back of her head on the rounded edge of the concrete curb. The sound made several people stop in place. The truck stopped immediately, and Dana remained unresponsive. A trained bystander checked her airway, while another called for help. Store staff brought a first aid kit and cleared the area. Fire department medics arrived within minutes, assessed her severe head injury, and prepared her for transport. Later that evening, authorities confirmed that Dana died from severe blunt head trauma caused by the backward fall. The medical report noted that the low-speed impact alone was not fatal, but the unbraced fall onto the curb created enough force to cause a catastrophic injury. In the weeks that followed, the store repainted crosswalk lines, added a pedestrian-only walkway in front of the main row, and posted signs reminding customers to watch for moving cars before stepping backward into the lane. It was October 9th, 2016 in Manila, Philippines, on a warm, humid evening as hotel guests stepped onto their balconies to watch the sunset over the bay. The sky was clear, the water reflected orange light, and the upper floors were filled with people taking photos of the skyline. On the 27th floor was 29-year-old Lorna Del Monte, an office worker from Quezon City, on a weekend trip with two friends. Lorna was known among people who traveled with her for pushing limits during photos, climbing railings, leaning too far, and arguing with anyone who suggested she stop. She had already been pacing in and out of the balcony, complaining loudly that the railing was ruining her angles. The balcony had standard safety features: a waist-high railing, smooth floor tiles, and a lightweight patio chair. None of it was meant for climbing, but Lorna dragged the chair toward the edge anyway. Her friends told her several times to step down, but she brushed them off, telling them to quit exaggerating. Guests on the next balcony noticed her behavior. One woman leaned over and said in a calm voice that standing on the chair wasn't safe on a high floor. Lorna immediately snapped back, raising her voice so half the floor could hear. She insisted she had every right to take photos however she wanted, adding that she paid for this balcony and could use it any way she sees fit. The visitor tried again to warn her about the wobbling chair, but Lorna cut her off, telling her to mind her own business. Her friends tried to intervene, but Lorna waved them away, saying they were ruining her shot. She climbed onto the patio chair, holding her phone outward, repeating that people needed to stop policing everything. More guests stepped onto their balconies to capture the sunset. Several noticed Lorna shifting her stance on the chair, trying to tilt her phone farther out over the rail. A guest 2 floors above later reported seeing the chair legs slide slightly, each time she leaned forward. At 5:56 p.m., the light was at its brightest, a deep orange. Lorna leaned farther over the balcony, telling her friends she needed one more photo. Witnesses on the balcony said she pushed her whole upper body past the railing, while stretching her arm outward with her phone. As she shifted her weight, the back leg of the chair slid on the smooth tile. Just an inch, her friend later said, but enough to throw off her footing. Since her upper body was already extended beyond the railing, that tiny slide pulled her center of gravity forward. The chair tipped, and her upper body went over with it. Guests on the 26th and 25th floors later reported hearing a sharp, heavy impact on the utility roof below. Several people on the pool deck looked up after hearing the same sound and notified hotel staff. From inside the room, one friend immediately called for help, while the other kept repeating that she had told Lorna to get off the chair. A guest in the neighboring room contacted emergency services after hearing the thud and seeing movement on the lower roof. Hotel security reached the utility roof within minutes and cleared the surrounding area. Lorna's friends were escorted indoors while responders conducted an on-scene assessment and secured the location for emergency crews. Investigators concluded that Lorna died from multiple blunt force injuries consistent with a high-rise fall, noting the unstable chair, her position beyond the railing, and her refusal to step down as contributing factors. Staff later recovered her phone, which contained a partially framed bay photo taken seconds before the fall. Maintenance removed patio chairs from all upper-level balconies, and management added more prominent safety notices. It was June 28, 2017, at a public pool in Fairview, Washington, a small suburban city preparing for its busiest swim season. The afternoon was warm, and a steady line had formed at the entrance. Families carried towels, sunscreen, and pool toys, while the posted rules beside the gate reminded guests that outside food and drinks were not permitted past the check-in area. Standing in line with a large iced coffee was 41-year-old Denise Halbrook, known among neighbors for heated confrontations over small regulations. Residents who lived near her townhouse described her as someone who often demanded to speak to management whenever things didn't go her way. The staff at a local grocery store had previously documented disputes with her over return policies, discount limits, and parking spaces. That afternoon at the pool, her behavior followed the same pattern. As she approached the front desk, the teenage attendant repeated the policy: no outside food or drinks. Most guests either finished their drinks or tossed them. Denise didn't. Witnesses said her posture changed immediately. She raised her voice, waved her coffee cup, and argued that she'd paid too much to give it up. She compared the rule to a nearby town's pool and leaned toward the counter, pointing at the sign while criticizing it loudly. The attendant repeated the standard response, but Denise grew more agitated, questioning his authority and gesturing with the cup. When nothing changed, CCTV showed her abruptly dumping the entire drink across the check-in computer. Coffee splashed over the keyboard, ran down the cords, and the monitor flickered as the system shorted. The attendant stepped back while the lifeguard supervisor signaled for help. People in line shuffled away, unsure what she would do next. After being told police were being contacted, witnesses said Denise muttered angrily and backed away from the counter, still shouting. Security footage showed her taking several quick steps backward without looking behind her. The ground had a thin, slick layer of water from swimmers all afternoon. According to bystanders, her heel slipped the moment it touched the wet patch. One person reported seeing her arm jerk outward as she tried to catch herself, but her momentum carried her back. CCTV captured her foot skidding, her body dropping, and her head striking the concrete edge with a loud impact. She did not move afterward. A bystander called for space while the supervisor dialed 911. Parents pulled their children aside as staff kept the walkway clear. EMTs arrived within minutes, assessed her where she fell, and witnesses said it was clear she remained unresponsive throughout. Later that afternoon, officials confirmed Denise Halbrook died from severe head trauma caused by hitting the concrete. Security footage showed the entire sequence: her argument at the desk, the backward steps into a wet area, the slip, and the fatal impact. The pool added more non-slip mats and strengthened procedures for enforcing gate rules during crowded hours. It was July 18, 2015, at a county fairgrounds in central Iowa. The afternoon was warm and sticky, food stands were crowded, and people moved between games, booths, and small attractions. Near the center of the fair, volunteers set up a simple stage for a corn dog eating contest sponsored by a local diner. It was meant to be slow, friendly, and easy. One of the participants was 45-year-old Karen Halford, a part-time receptionist known in her neighborhood for arguing with staff at nearly every community event. Volunteers recognized her immediately. She had caused problems at raffles, parking areas, and even kids' craft tables. Karen often treated rules as optional, and insisted she deserved exceptions whenever she showed up. At registration, the organizer, Tom, explained the simple rules. Small bites, normal pace, water as needed. It wasn't timed. It wasn't a race. Witnesses said Karen cut him off almost immediately, talking over him and saying she didn't need instructions. Several people in line stepped aside as she kept arguing, insisting she would do it her own way. When Tom handed her the waiver, Karen objected again. A volunteer later said she argued for a couple of minutes, calling the form pointless, before finally signing with quick, forceful strokes. At the table, a front-row spectator saw her drag her tray closer, despite instructions to keep everything aligned for the cable recording. When Tom reminded her, she snapped that he was targeting her and refused to move it back. At 2:03 p.m., the contest began. Most people took small bites, laughed, and talked casually. Karen did the opposite. She grabbed each corn dog near the base and took large, fast bites, barely chewing. Several spectators later said it looked like she was trying to beat everyone, even though no one else was treating it like a competition. About 2 minutes in, she reached for her third corn dog. She bit off a large piece and tilted her head back to swallow it quickly. A nearby volunteer started to remind her to slow down, but Karen waved him off without breaking rhythm. Seconds later, she began coughing. Witnesses described it as short, sharp coughs at first, more like she was trying to push the food down. Then, according to security footage reviewed later, her upper body went rigid, and her arms pulled in close to her chest. The coughing stopped altogether. She reached for her water cup but dropped it before she could drink. Spectators saw Karen stagger sideways, knocking over her tray and spilling water across the platform. 2 people with basic first aid training stepped forward. One attempted abdominal thrusts while the other tried to check if anything was visible in her mouth, but nothing changed. The obstruction did not move. EMTs arrived within minutes. Ushers moved benches to clear a path as responders came through. From the edge of the crowd, people could see EMTs continuing airway checks and performing additional thrusts, but no visible response followed. The stage was closed off, and fair staff blocked the area with temporary fencing. Food-related events were canceled for the rest of the day. Later that evening, officials confirmed that Karen Halford died from a complete airway blockage caused by a large, unchewed piece of food. Security footage showed her ignoring the safety instructions, rushing through the contest, and refusing reminders to slow down. Fair organizers removed all eating competitions from future schedules and added updated guidelines stressing slow, careful consumption at public food activities. It was June 10, 2019, along the shallow coastal water near Staniel Cay in the Bahamas. The afternoon was warm and calm, with clear turquoise water and only a light breeze as small groups of tourists moved between the dock and the shoreline. 20-year-old Leah Porter, a college student from San Diego, was on a 5-day vacation with her boyfriend's family. She ran a small travel-themed Instagram page with roughly 7,000 followers and often looked for places that could give her unique photos. She had some casual surfing experience back home in California, but no training with wildlife or marine safety. After lunch, the group walked to the pier where several tourists were waist-deep in the water as nurse sharks circled them. A boat hand tossed small pieces of fish, keeping the sharks close, while people on the railing filmed and took photos. Leah showed her boyfriend's sister photos of people floating with nurse sharks and wanted the same shot. With tourists tossing fish nearby, she stepped into the waist-deep water as her boyfriend filmed from the dock. After some kneeling poses, a boat worker suggested she try lying back to float for a better picture. Leah shifted from kneeling to a slow backward lean, lowering herself until her back touched the surface. She spread her arms slightly and kept her face above water to stay balanced. The water was less than 4 feet deep, and the sharks continued circling in loose patterns around her. A tourist farther down the pier tossed more fish into the water, and this caused several sharks to change direction at once. One shark passed under Leah's right side and clamped onto her forearm near the wrist. The bite held for several seconds, causing puncture wounds and a painful crushing sensation. When she pulled upward, the movement caused the skin to tear along the bite line, releasing a noticeable but not massive amount of blood into the clear water. Leah surfaced again but was unable to get a steady footing. Witnesses shouted for her to stand or move toward the ladder, but she appeared disoriented. She tried to protect her injured arm with her free hand, which limited her ability to push herself upright. A tourist in the water attempted to move toward her but stopped when another shark passed close to his leg. Leah slipped on the algae-covered rocks beneath the water and fell backward, striking the side of her head on a submerged rock. Witnesses saw her go under again, but noted that she did not attempt to push herself back up. Her boyfriend's father stopped filming and ran to the ladder while two men climbed down to reach her. They brought her up within seconds, but her body went limp. Bystanders placed her on the dock, but she showed no sign of breathing. An official report listed drowning as the primary cause of death. Investigators noted diluted blood in the water and concluded that the arm injury contributed to her loss of balance. But the head impact was the critical factor that prevented her from resurfacing. In the weeks that followed, park staff placed new warning signs along the pier. The notices were small metal plates fixed to the railings, advising visitors not to enter the water with the nurse sharks and reminding them that the animals were still wild despite their calm appearance. Local workers said the signs were added after repeated questions from tourists who had seen previous photos online. It was November 5, 2016, a typically warm night in Iztapalapa, on the eastern side of Mexico City. The evening seemed ordinary from the outside, quiet and unremarkable, as three young men settled in after work around 11 p.m., talking casually while they passed the time. Inside was 23-year-old Luis Mendoza, a veterinary assistant who posted short comedy videos and party clips to his Facebook page. He had built a small following of around 5,000 people, most of whom were friends, co-workers, and local viewers who enjoyed his casual style. Luis sometimes tried small stunts or props in his clips, usually for laughs. Earlier that week, he had uploaded a short video holding an airsoft pistol. It wasn't serious, but the post received more likes than usual. Friends later explained that Luis intended to take it further with something meant to get more attention. That Saturday, he invited two friends, Raul and Marco, to hang out with him. They brought beer, played music through a Bluetooth speaker, and scrolled through clips on their phones, joking about ideas for Luis's next post. Raul brought a real .45 caliber handgun that belonged to his older cousin and set it on the coffee table, assuring the others it wasn't loaded. He removed the magazine but never checked the chamber. Luis picked up the pistol for a moment, turning it in his hands and pointing it toward the wall. Both later told investigators they believed it was empty. Around 11:30 p.m., Luis set up his phone on a low shelf across the living room and angled it toward the area where he planned to record. The phone's front camera showed the couch, the coffee table, and a narrow space where he liked to stand when filming. Raul sat on the couch, and Marco leaned against the wall with a bottle of beer. The video, later recovered by police, begins with Luis stepping into the frame, picking up the pistol from the coffee table and posing with it. He lifts the gun, turns his body toward the camera, and flexes his arm as if performing for his audience. Raul's voice can be heard telling him to check the gun. Luis waves him off and says it's not loaded. Luis raises the gun sideways and aims it slightly above the phone. He brings it closer to his face, turning it so the camera captures the side of the slide and the barrel. His friends later explained that he wanted it to appear convincing, so he reinserted the magazine. The video shows him tapping the magazine into place without checking the chamber or inspecting the slide. He then shifts his weight, adjusts his stance, and raises the gun with his right hand. The muzzle ends up only a few inches from his temple as he tries to frame himself and the pistol in the shot. With his left hand, he moves the phone slightly to the side, trying to center the image. As he does this, his right index finger settles fully on the trigger. A single gunshot echoes through the small room. The video captures the flash from the muzzle and the loud impact as the bullet strikes his head. Luis drops straight down out of the frame and hits the floor. Raul jumps up, knocking the phone off the shelf. Marco shouts for someone to call for help. The camera continues recording from the floor until the battery alert appears. Neighbors in the building report hearing one loud shot followed by yelling. Several call the local emergency number within minutes. When police and medical personnel arrive, Luis is already dead on the living room floor with the handgun nearby. The official report lists a self-inflicted gunshot to the head as the cause of death, with the manner ruled accidental. The video remains sealed as evidence in the case file. Police did not file charges against Raul or Marco. Both were treated as witnesses. Raul later faced a separate citation for unlawful possession of the handgun. It was August 16, 2015, a humid Sunday at a small nature park in rural Zamboanga, Sibugay, Philippines. A light drizzle had left the air heavy and the paths slick, though families and small groups still moved through the area at a relaxed pace. Among the visitors was 26-year-old Mark Lester Ramos, a part-time tricycle driver who managed a small YouTube channel showcasing low-cost attractions and lesser-known places in the province. He had fewer than 5,000 subscribers, but often tried to make his videos appear more exciting than other local creators. Mark arrived with two friends, Jun and Armin, planning to film a simple vlog about the park's wildlife. He held a basic smartphone on a handheld stick and, according to his friends, aimed to get a closer shot of the crocodile to make the video more noticeable. The crocodile enclosure was basic, a waist-high concrete wall topped with chain-link fencing around a muddy pool. Visitors usually stayed behind the barrier to observe the animal, though some tossed food scraps despite staff warnings. By mid-afternoon, the group reached the pen. A single adult crocodile rested half-submerged about 15 feet from the fence. Other visitors, including two families, stood nearby. The wet concrete around the barrier was slick from the humidity. Mark filmed himself walking toward the enclosure, talking about the mangroves and the crocodile exhibit while his friends followed. He stopped at the fence, zoomed in on the animal, and pointed out its size. After recording for a short moment, he passed the phone to Jun and indicated that he wanted to appear in the frame. Witnesses said he moved quickly as he stepped onto the lower ledge, swung one leg over the concrete barrier, and lowered himself onto the narrow strip inside the enclosure. Several people immediately told him to get out. Ignoring the warnings, Mark positioned himself with the crocodile clearly behind him. He stepped backward toward the algae-covered slope, slipped, and slid several feet toward the water. The sudden movement triggered the crocodile's response. Multiple witnesses later described the animal lunging forward in a single, swift motion. It covered the distance from the far side of the pool faster than most people watching seemed to expect. As Mark tried to push himself up, the crocodile reached him and clamped onto his lower leg just above the ankle. In one pull, it dragged him completely into the shallow, muddy water. Jun's phone recorded the moment he disappeared under the surface. The audio captured visitors shouting and backing away from the fence. The pool churned as the crocodile performed a short twisting motion. Mud and silt rose to the surface, turning the water cloudy. Mark did not reappear. The enclosure area cleared quickly as people stepped back onto the walkway, keeping distance from the fence while several visitors tried to alert staff. Park personnel reached the enclosure within minutes, but were unable to enter because the crocodile continued moving aggressively in the shallow water. Staff used poles to assess where the animal had dragged Mark, but visibility was too poor to confirm his exact position. The team waited until trained handlers arrived with equipment to restrain the crocodile. Later that day, once the animal was secured and the water had settled enough to allow safe entry, staff located Mark's body in the deeper section of the pool. The position of his injuries and the disturbed sediment along the slope provided a clear sequence of how the attack occurred. The official report listed multiple traumatic injuries consistent with a crocodile attack, including deep bites to his leg and lower torso, and damage from the twisting motion. These injuries, combined with drowning, were identified as the cause of death. Investigators noted that he had stepped into a restricted zone while attempting to film himself for his channel. The enclosure remained closed for several weeks, while staff reinforced the barrier and added clearer warning signs to prevent similar intrusions. It was December 12th, 2018 in Wolverhampton, United Kingdom. Light fog settled over an industrial area where an abandoned warehouse stood open. The building had become a regular filming spot for young YouTubers who used the empty floor for simple stunt recordings. Among the group was 22-year-old Callum Hargreaves, a small British YouTuber with roughly 7,000 subscribers. His channel focused on shock-based stunts such as paint can blasts, prank setups, and homemade versions of online challenges. A similar stunt had recently gone viral when another creator trapped his head in a microwave and was freed by emergency crews. Callum had told his friends he planned to attempt the same concept in a more controlled way for a stronger video. Callum and 3 friends, Sam, Lewis, and Harvey, brought a low-cost white microwave, a plastic contractor bag, 7 bags of quick-setting construction filler, and a small ventilation tube they purchased from a hardware store. They arranged 2 cameras on tripods and prepared a handheld camera for close angles. The setup was straightforward. Callum would place his head inside the microwave lined with the plastic bag. The others would pour in the filler mixture, and after it hardened, they would break open the microwave for the final shot. No one present had experience with mixing fast-curing filler, ventilation safety, or emergency extraction. The only airflow planned for Callum was the narrow tube leading from his mouth to outside the microwave casing. Around 3 p.m., the cameras began recording. In the first take, Callum knelt beside the microwave, joking for the intro while his friends mixed the filler in buckets. They lined the inside of the microwave with the plastic bag, slid the ventilation tube through a corner of the door, and helped Callum lower his head inside. Callum's shoulders rested against the microwave's rim while Lewis held the ventilation tube steady. Harvey poured the first bucket of filler around the back of Callum's head, followed by more from the remaining bags. The mixture filled the space quickly. As it thickened, Callum's head became fixed in place. His arms remained outside the microwave. For several minutes, the group recorded close-ups of the fast-curing filler rising along the sides of the plastic, joking about how solid it was becoming. After about 15 minutes, the filler began to cure. The pressure around Callum's neck and jaw increased as the compound tightened and expanded slightly during setting. When the group tried lifting the microwave to start removing it, they realized Callum's head was firmly trapped. The ventilation tube had bent sharply as the appliance shifted, reducing airflow. In the recording, Sam noted that the tube was not providing air. Soon after, Callum's shoulders tightened and his arms moved uncontrollably. The group pulled on the microwave door, but the hardened filler held it shut. They tried to cut the plastic with a small saw, but the tool barely reached the material. Lewis called for emergency help while the others attempted to support Callum's body, which had started to lean sideways as he fought for air. Before the call connected, Callum's movements slowed. The tight seal caused by the hardened filler left no room for breathing, and the bent tube no longer provided airflow. The friends continued trying to break the appliance, but the fast-curing filler had already hardened. By the time firefighters arrived with extraction tools, Callum was unresponsive. They broke through the microwave and cut away the hardened filler, removing pieces in chunks to reach his neck and head. Fire crews freed Callum within minutes of arrival, but he showed no signs of breathing. Paramedics confirmed he had died from airway obstruction and compression caused by the hardened filler, with asphyxiation listed as the official cause of death. His friends were interviewed as witnesses, and investigators ruled the incident accidental with no criminal intent. The video remained unpublished and was kept as evidence, and authorities noted the case as an example of how minor online challenges can turn deadly when creators try to escalate them for views. It was February 14, 2016, a cold day in northern Minnesota. Temperatures stayed around 18 degrees Fahrenheit with a steady winter wind. A frozen lake surface stretched across the area, marked by old fishing holes and patches of uneven frosted ice that showed clear signs of past activity. Tyler Brandt, 24, ran a small YouTube channel focused on cold exposure challenges and minimal gear endurance attempts. He had a little over 6,000 subscribers and often filmed improvised stunts on frozen lakes near his hometown. Friends later told investigators that Tyler had tried short under-ice swims before, but had never attempted one this long or without a safety line. Tyler wore swim trunks, neoprene gloves, and a beanie. His friend Mason, who often helped him film outdoor challenges, handled the camera and assisted with the setup. Before starting, Tyler spoke briefly on video about his past cold water attempts as the wind moved across the ice. Using a handsaw, Tyler and Mason widened an existing fishing hole to roughly 3 feet. The surrounding ice was thick, uneven, and coated in frost. Once they finished clearing the area, Tyler crouched beside the opening. He lowered himself into the water with both hands, reacting to the temperature but managing to steady his breathing. Mason reminded him to stay oriented by keeping track of the light from the opening. After a short countdown, Tyler submerged and pushed forward under the ice. The camera recorded bubbles rising as he moved. For several seconds, Mason saw a faint shape beneath the surface, but the ice quickly became opaque from air pockets, frost, and snow layered across it. Mason leaned over the opening and shifted around as he tried to find Tyler's position. When several more seconds passed with no movement underneath, he began calling for him and striking the ice to get a response. Fishermen located farther down the lake later reported hearing the noise. Under the ice, Tyler had drifted away from the entry hole. Investigators later found markings indicating he tried to locate the opening by feeling upward. Each attempt brought him to solid ice. He moved in different directions along the underside, leaving scuff marks and dents. At one point, he attempted to force his way through the ice using his shoulders and hands, but the layer was too thick to break. These attempts continued for nearly a minute, with no visual reference and near-freezing water rapidly affecting his coordination. Tyler eventually inhaled water. Mason notified nearby fishermen who helped contact emergency responders. Search crews arrived shortly after and used Mason's description of the direction Tyler had swum. They located him several yards from the original opening, still beneath the ice sheet. The official report identified the cause of death as drowning due to cold water submersion under ice. The low water temperature and near-zero visibility were listed as major contributing factors. Investigators photographed the scuff marks Tyler had made while searching for a way out, supporting the conclusion that he became disoriented almost immediately after leaving the hole. Recovery notes showed Tyler had turned repeatedly under the ice in the final moments, leaving scattered markings along the underside. Investigators concluded that he lost the opening almost immediately and was overcome by the cold before he could reorient himself. The final report emphasized how quickly disorientation sets in during under-ice swims, even for people familiar with cold water exposure. It was April 6, 2018 in Fresno, California. A quiet apartment complex sat along a residential street, where a second-floor unit held a beauty influencer preparing her next recording session. 23-year-old Marissa Thompson ran a modest beauty and lifestyle channel with just over 8,000 followers, most of them drawn to her budget makeup tutorials and DIY cosmetic hacks. In the week leading up to the incident, she posted several clips hinting at a low-cost lip filler experiment inspired by a viral trend using hyaluron pens bought online to inject hyaluronic acid without needles. According to later statements from friends, Marissa believed the device was safer than conventional filler techniques because it didn't use a syringe. Her apartment held a small recording setup, a ring light facing the bathroom mirror, a tripod near the sink, and cosmetic products arranged on a towel. A new hyaluronic acid ampule and an online-purchased hyaluron pen were among them, later confirmed to be an unregulated beginner cosmetic device. Marissa recorded short intros about her previous professional fillers, then loaded the ampule, primed the pen, and marked points along her upper lip using guides from other creators. Her first press of the pen delivered a high-pressure burst of hyaluronic acid into the upper lip. The video showed mild swelling almost immediately, which she noted as expected. She repeated the process twice more on adjacent marks. Within a minute, the tissue around the injection points began to swell unevenly, and she paused to examine the left side of her lip. A faint discoloration appeared at the corner, followed by a rapid deepening of the shade. Over the next 2 minutes, footage showed progressive modeling spreading upward toward the philtrum, an early sign of vascular compromise. The device's pressure had forced filler material into an artery, blocking blood flow. Marissa stepped back from the mirror and touched the area with her fingertips. The camera captured her raising her hand toward her chest as breathing became strained. Investigators later explained that the swelling along the upper lip and mid-face region was progressing rapidly, reducing her ability to draw air. Footage recorded her moving out of frame as she attempted to reach the kitchen, where her phone was located on the counter. A neighbor reported hearing a loud thud around this time, followed by the sound of something sliding across the floor. When responders later reviewed the scene, they found the phone lying near the cabinets with the emergency number partially dialed but not sent. Minutes passed before a downstairs neighbor, alerted by the noise, knocked on her door. When there was no response, she contacted the apartment manager, who used a spare key to enter. Marissa was found collapsed near the hallway entrance with pronounced swelling along the midface, obstructed nasal passages, and significant discoloration extending from the lip area. No breathing was detected. Emergency responders arrived shortly after and attempted advanced airway support, but were unable to reverse the obstruction and progressive swelling. She was pronounced dead at the hospital. The medical examiner determined her death resulted from airway obstruction caused by vascular occlusion and rapid soft tissue swelling following a high-pressure hyaluronic acid injection. Toxicology showed no contributing substances. Investigators collected the hyaluron pen, the cosmetic products on the counter, and the recording device. Footage confirmed the incident unfolded in under 10 minutes. The case was ruled accidental, highlighting the risks of unregulated high-pressure cosmetic tools sold online without proper oversight. It was October 22, 2016, when 29-year-old Haley Monroe boarded Flight 1847 for what should have been a routine trip to visit family in the Midwest. An outgoing office administrator from Phoenix, Haley was known among friends for her spontaneous nature and tendency to bend minor rules when convenient. Seated in 22C, an aisle seat, Haley chatted briefly with her seatmate, a 27-year-old college student who seemed focused on following every safety instruction to the letter. Nearby, a 32-year-old flight attendant methodically secured the cabin as weather reports indicated potential clear air turbulence ahead. An off-duty emergency medical technician, age 41, sat 3 rows forward, quietly reading. As the aircraft reached cruising altitude over the Midwest, the captain illuminated the seatbelt sign and announced that all passengers should remain seated with belts fastened due to expected rough air. The crew quickly stowed service carts and moved to their jump seats, blocking lavatories with occupied signs as standard procedure dictated. Light chop began almost immediately, causing minor vibrations throughout the cabin. Despite the illuminated seatbelt sign and recent announcements, Haley unbuckled her restraint and stood to retrieve a power bank from the overhead compartment. Her seatmate glanced up nervously but said nothing as Haley balanced on one foot in the aisle, reaching upward with her left hand gripping the bin edge. Without warning, the aircraft encountered a severe downdraft. The sudden vertical drop created momentary weightlessness, launching Haley upward until her head struck the ceiling panel with significant force. The impact sent her tumbling downward, where she collided with the rigid corner of the seatback in front of her, causing her neck to hyperextend violently. A lateral jolt then threw her against an overhead service module, opening a scalp wound before a forward pitch slammed her upper chest across another seatback corner. The sequence of impacts resulted in a basilar skull fracture, multiple rib fractures, and critical instability between her second and third cervical vertebrae. The off-duty medical professional immediately moved to assist, providing manual spine stabilization, while the flight attendant retrieved oxygen equipment and an automated external defibrillator. Haley's breathing became increasingly labored before stopping entirely, her heart rhythm deteriorating into pulseless electrical activity. The crew initiated high-quality cardiopulmonary resuscitation, while the captain declared an emergency and diverted to the nearest suitable airport. The AED analyzed her heart rhythm repeatedly, but advised no shock was needed, indicating the electrical activity was present but ineffective. Upon landing, paramedics boarded immediately and continued advanced life support measures, but Haley showed no signs of neurological function. After following standard resuscitation protocols, she was pronounced deceased. The medical examiner determined that blunt force trauma resulting in traumatic brain injury and high cervical spine instability was the cause of death, with pulmonary contusion listed as a contributing factor. The airline documented the incident according to federal regulations, noting that no aircraft structural damage occurred and all safety equipment functioned properly. The investigation revealed that Haley had ignored multiple safety warnings, including illuminated seatbelt signs, public address announcements, and visible placards instructing passengers to remain seated during turbulence. Her decision to stand and move about the cabin during a period of known atmospheric instability directly contributed to the fatal outcome. This tragic incident serves as a stark reminder that aircraft safety procedures exist for critical reasons and that clear air turbulence can strike without warning, turning routine flights deadly for those who choose to disregard basic safety protocols. His center of mass shifted beyond the building's exterior face, and gravity took control. Derek plummeted through the air, first striking a ledge one level down with devastating force to his right side. The impact shattered multiple ribs and caused severe internal injuries, but momentum carried him further downward in a tumoring motion. His final impact occurred on level 6, where he landed primarily on the right side of his head and shoulder. Witnesses heard a single, heavy thud, followed by eerie silence. Derek's injuries were catastrophic and immediately life-threatening. His chest wall collapsed from multiple fractured ribs, creating a flailed chest that severely compromised breathing. Internal bleeding began from a grade 4 liver laceration, while his brain suffered massive trauma from skull fractures and developing subdural hematoma. His friends immediately called emergency services, while the security guard rushed down with an automated external defibrillator. However, Derek's injuries were beyond what basic life support could address. Emergency medical technicians arrived quickly and initiated advanced trauma protocols, but the combination of severe head trauma, internal bleeding, and chest injuries proved unsurvivable. Derek was pronounced dead at the hospital after all resuscitation efforts failed. Investigation revealed Derek had deliberately climbed over posted safety barriers and ignored multiple warning signs. The parking facility subsequently installed additional anti-climb measures and increased security camera coverage. This tragedy serves as a sobering reminder that social media stunts and thrill-seeking behavior can have permanent, devastating consequences when basic safety measures are ignored. It was March 19, 2016, when 31-year-old Lila Patterson pulled into a scenic turnout along the Big Sur coastline, eager to capture the perfect photograph. An administrative assistant known for her outgoing personality and love of outdoor adventures, Lila was on a weekend road trip with her partner, exploring California's dramatic coastal highways. Her traveling companion, a 33-year-old freelance photographer, had suggested this overlook for its stunning ocean views. Also present were a middle-aged couple, both teachers, and a 68-year-old park volunteer, a retired ranger who educated visitors about coastal safety. The overlook featured spectacular Pacific Ocean views, but came with serious hazards. Warning signs alerted visitors to unstable cliff edges, formed by undercut sandstone formations and sneaker waves. Safety ropes marked secure viewing zones, keeping visitors from dangerous areas where wave action had eroded the cliff face. Recent rainfall had left the ground treacherous, with slick clay covering the soil near the cliff edge. Lila wore flat-soled fashion sandals that provided minimal traction on wet terrain. Despite posted warnings and rope barriers, Lila stepped beyond the designated safe zone for an unobstructed ocean view. Her partner remained behind the safety rope, setting up a camera with a timer. The park volunteer called out for her to stay behind the ropes, while the visiting couple decided the wet conditions were too risky. High tide was approaching, and wave intervals were becoming shorter and more intense. The powerful swells had been undercutting the cliff face for hours, weakening the already unstable sandstone formation. As Lila positioned herself for the shot, a larger wave crashed against the cliff base with tremendous force, The impact sent vibrations through the undercut ledge, causing the cliff edge to suddenly give way beneath her feet. The ground crumbled away, creating an unexpected step-down that sent Lila sliding on the slick clay. Her left sandal lost traction as she tried to pivot back towards stable ground, but momentum carried her outward over the void. Her partner reached out instinctively, but could not safely extend far enough to help. Lila plummeted approximately 60 to 70 feet toward the rocky coastline below. Her first impact occurred on a sloped rock shelf, where her right forearm and hip absorbed the initial force. The collision resulted in an open radius fracture, severe pelvic fracture, and compressive spinal injuries. The impact redirected her trajectory into a tide pool where incoming waves immediately overwhelmed her compromised position. A following wave swept her toward a narrow channel filled with submerged rocks. Her head struck an underwater obstacle, causing skull fracture that diminished her protective reflexes. Seawater aspiration followed as she lost consciousness. Her partner called emergency services while the park volunteer guided responders to the safest access point, marking the location with his bright jacket. The Marine rescue team timed their approach between wave sets to reach her safely. When they extracted Lila from the water, they immediately began cardiopulmonary resuscitation, but she showed persistent hypoxia from seawater in her lungs. Advanced airway management was attempted, but Lila never regained spontaneous circulation. She was pronounced dead at the scene after all resuscitation protocols were exhausted. The medical examiner determined the cause of death was blunt force trauma combined with drowning, with spinal and pelvic injuries as contributing factors. The incident was classified as accidental, though investigators noted that disregarding posted safety boundaries was a key factor. Following this tragedy, park authorities extended rope barriers further from the cliff edge and installed additional warning signs about high tide hazards and coastal erosion unpredictability. It was November 10, 2018, when 38-year-old Grant Whitaker made a decision that would cost him his life at a warehouse facility on the outskirts of Columbus, Ohio. A pragmatic warehouse associate known for his improvisational problem-solving approach, Grant had volunteered to stay late and replace a burned-out high bay light fixture above aisle 7. Working alongside him were a 35-year-old forklift operator who held proper certification, a 22-year-old temporary worker still learning procedures, and a 44-year-old shift supervisor known for strict safety adherence, though he was currently on break. The warehouse had an approved man cage for elevated maintenance work, but it was stored 2 aisles away and blocked by stacked pallets. With only 10 minutes before the facility's automated lighting would cycle off, Grant felt pressured to find a quicker solution. His improvised plan involved placing a stepladder on a wooden pallet, then using the forklift to raise this makeshift platform 18 feet to reach the fixture. This violated multiple safety protocols, including posted signs reading, "No riders on forks," and company policies requiring proper fall protection. The forklift had a maintenance tag noting minor hydraulic drift, where the lift mechanism would slowly settle under load. The operator believed this manageable for a quick task, though it would prove critical to the accident. Grant positioned himself on the step ladder while standing on the pallet, and the operator carefully raised him toward the fixture. The improvised platform provided no guardrails, safety harness points, or protective features found on proper man cage equipment. As Grant worked to remove the burned-out bulb, hydraulic drift caused subtle swaying. The vibration, combined with Grant's twisting motion, caused the stepladder to shift position on the pallet surface. The ladder's foot began sliding toward the pallet's beveled edge, creating instability. Grant attempted to compensate by widening his stance, but this brought his boot sole into contact with the angled edge where traction was minimal. Grant's footing gave way entirely. He fell backward from 18 feet, with his left forearm striking the falling ladder and redirecting his trajectory so he would impact the concrete floor head first. Primary impact occurred at the back of Grant's skull, followed by secondary impact to his upper back. The stepladder toppled after him and struck his lower leg. Grant's injuries were immediately catastrophic. The impact caused depressed skull fracture and C5 to C6 cervical spine dislocation, resulting in severe spinal cord damage. The latter strike caused compound tibia and fibula fractures. The spinal cord injury triggered neurogenic shock, causing irregular breathing that ceased within minutes. His cardiovascular system began failing as neurological damage disrupted vital functions. The forklift operator immediately called emergency services, but Grant's injuries were beyond basic first aid. Workers avoided moving him due to obvious spinal injuries, though his breathing had already stopped. Emergency medical technicians attempted to establish an airway and provide ventilatory support, but Grant showed no viable neurological signs. After following standard protocols for traumatic arrest, he was pronounced dead at the scene. The safety investigation revealed multiple policy violations, including improvised platform use instead of proper equipment, failure to secure approved man cage access, and inadequate fall protection. The warehouse implemented immediate changes, including reconfiguring storage to keep safety equipment accessible and requiring supervisor authorization for after-hours equipment use. Grant's death was certified as accidental, caused by blunt force trauma with high cervical spine injury from an industrial fall. It was January 8, 2015, when 34-year-old Sabrina Cole made a fatal decision during a brutal Minnesota winter power outage that had left her Minneapolis apartment without heat for over 6 hours. A customer service representative known for her independent nature and resourceful problem-solving skills, Sabrina lived alone in a second-floor unit. The sub-zero temperatures had caused the building's heating system to fail. Living in the same building were a 52-year-old maintenance worker in the unit below who was attentive to unusual sounds, and a 60-year-old building superintendent who had previously distributed winter safety reminders about proper heating devices. Faced with dropping indoor temperatures, Sabrina retrieved a small charcoal grill from her balcony storage. The manufacturer's warnings were clearly visible, explicitly stating outdoor use only and detailing carbon monoxide hazards associated with indoor combustion. Despite these warnings, Sabrina set up the grill on ceramic tiles near her coffee table. She placed towels along door gaps to prevent heat loss and kept all windows closed against the bitter wind. Critically, she had removed her smoke detector battery weeks earlier due to nuisance alarms, and her unit lacked a carbon monoxide detector. Sabrina lit the charcoal using lighter fluid. With no ventilation and all openings sealed, the combustion process quickly began consuming available oxygen while producing deadly carbon monoxide gas. The colorless, odorless gas accumulated in the sealed environment. Carbon monoxide binds to hemoglobin more readily than oxygen, gradually reducing her blood's ability to carry life-sustaining oxygen to vital organs. As carbon monoxide levels rose, Sabrina's movements became slower and coordination declined. Carbon monoxide poisoning often mimics fatigue, making victims unaware of their deteriorating condition. Eventually, oxygen deprivation reached critical levels, and Sabrina collapsed onto the carpet. Her breathing became shallow and irregular as her brain and heart struggled to function with severely compromised oxygen delivery. The charcoal continued burning, maintaining high carbon monoxide concentrations. Sabrina's pulse weakened as cardiac arrhythmias developed, ultimately progressing to complete cardiac arrest. The downstairs neighbor detected faint exhaust odor seeping through the building's ventilation. After hearing what sounded like a heavy thud and receiving no response to knocking, he contacted the superintendent. The superintendent used his master key to enter and immediately discovered Sabrina unconscious with the grill still smoldering. He called emergency services while opening windows to ventilate the space. Firefighters' gas detection equipment registered dangerously high carbon monoxide levels. They ventilated the space while paramedics attempted resuscitation using 100% oxygen through a bag valve mask. Sabrina was transported with ongoing cardiopulmonary resuscitation, but prolonged oxygen deprivation had caused irreversible brain and heart damage. Despite advanced medical interventions, she never regained spontaneous circulation and was pronounced dead. The medical examiner determined carbon monoxide poisoning as the cause of death, classified as accidental. The autopsy revealed characteristic bright red post-mortem lividity, associated with carbon monoxide exposure. Following this tragedy, building management installed interconnected carbon monoxide detectors throughout all units and distributed comprehensive winter safety information, emphasizing deadly risks of using outdoor equipment indoors. The incident report highlighted two critical factors: the removed smoke detector battery and indoor use of equipment designed exclusively for outdoor operation, both directly contributing to this preventable death. It was July 4, 2018, when 28-year-old Nolan Pierce decided to host a backyard fireworks display at his suburban Charleston home that would end in tragedy. A line cook known for his outgoing personality and do-it-yourself approach, Nolan had invited friends and family to celebrate Independence Day with consumer-grade aerial fireworks. Among his guests were his 30-year-old cousin, who worked as an electrician, a 47-year-old neighbor who taught at a local school, and a 25-year-old friend who worked in landscaping. All had gathered to watch Nolan's planned fireworks show. Nolan had purchased several 5-inch aerial shells and mortar tubes, planning an impressive display. However, his setup violated basic safety principles that would prove fatal. Instead of using proper stabilization, Nolan taped the mortar tube to a lightweight plastic patio chair positioned on uneven lawn. Manufacturer instructions clearly stated tubes should be placed on flat, firm surfaces and braced securely. But Nolan dismissed these guidelines. Evening conditions included winds gusting 8 to 10 miles per hour, with damp grass from earlier rain. These factors contributed to his improvised launch system's instability. Nolan had trimmed the fuse shorter than recommended, believing this would create a dramatic, quick light effect. This modification reduced the safety margin, allowing operators to reach safe distance after ignition. His neighbor suggested moving to the driveway for better stability, but Nolan preferred the lawn location. Spectators positioned themselves within 20 feet, much closer than recommended safe distance. When Nolan loaded the shell and lit the shortened fuse, he stepped back only a few feet. The initial impulse caused the lightweight chair to shift, tilting the mortar tube away from vertical orientation. The shell's lift charge failed to provide adequate thrust to clear the tube properly. Instead of launching skyward, the device functioned at the tube mouth, creating a devastating close-range explosion. The blast wave and high-velocity fragments from the shell, tube, and chair struck Nolan's chest and neck with tremendous force. The explosion occurred at chest height, maximizing impact on vital structures. Nolan sustained immediate penetrating wounds to his right upper chest and lower neck, with probable major blood vessel damage including carotid and jugular injuries. The blast caused lung tissue disruption from pressure waves. He collapsed immediately, with bright red blood flowing rapidly from neck and chest wounds. His breathing became shallow as his airway was compromised by blood, and his cardiovascular system began failing from massive blood loss. His cousin applied direct pressure with towels while the neighbor called emergency services and moved spectators away from smoldering debris. Despite efforts to control bleeding, the vascular injuries were too severe for basic first aid. Nolan's pulse weakened rapidly and became undetectable as blood pressure dropped from hemorrhage. His skin turned pale and cool as hypovolemic shock set in. Emergency medical technicians applied specialized dressings, including occlusive chest seals and hemostatic gauze to neck wounds. They attempted advanced airway management while initiating rapid transport. Despite aggressive resuscitation continuing en route, Nolan suffered cardiac arrest from blood loss and chest trauma. All attempts to restore circulation failed, and he was pronounced dead upon hospital arrival. The medical examiner determined cause of death as blast injuries with exsanguination from cervical vascular trauma, classified as accidental. Investigation revealed multiple safety violations, including unsecured mortar, altered fuse length, and insufficient standoff distance. Police documented the scene and issued community reminders about proper fireworks safety. The family disposed of remaining fireworks, and the neighborhood association later circulated comprehensive safety guidelines for future celebrations. It was June 14th, 2015, when 23-year-old Claire Maddox arrived at a popular desert overlook in northern Arizona, chasing the perfect shot for her biggest payday yet. Claire had signed a paid partnership requiring a dramatic hero image with an uninterrupted horizon by Sunday noon. A substantial bonus and timed giveaway depended on hitting engagement targets within 24 hours. Claire was energetic and fiercely ambitious, always pushing boundaries to stand out. She traveled with Eli, a 26-year-old videographer known for meticulous compositions, and Nia, a 24-year-old outdoor guide whose cautious nature often clashed with Claire's risk-taking instincts. The temperature had climbed to 96 degrees, with wind gusts between 10 and 18 miles per hour. Posted signs warned visitors to stay back from the unstable edge. Claire and her team scouted the main viewpoint, but realized warning placards and tourists would appear in every frame. A campaign representative had been explicit: deliver a cliff-clean look with nothing but sky and stone. They moved to an unmaintained spur roughly 2 to 3 feet beyond the established path. Nia pointed out visible micro-sloughing along the edge and recommended staying farther back, but Eli had already positioned his tripod about 5 feet from the rim. The campaign team sent another text urging them to edge 1 to 2 feet closer for symmetry. In reality, the message came through Claire's social media manager, who relayed the brand's feedback in real time, a detail that only added to the mounting pressure. Multiple test shots were rejected because a warning sign kept appearing in frame. A campaign representative messaged again, emphasizing the need for one clean pass. Claire, wearing smooth-soled fashion sandals, stepped onto a thin limestone lip extending roughly 2 feet over open air. Eli called for a slow pan and a 3-count lean toward the gorge. A secondary phone showed live engagement numbers and a countdown for the giveaway. An 18-mile-per-hour gust hit just as Claire extended her 40-inch selfie stick to full length. Her day pack swung outward, shifting her center of mass forward by about 8 inches. Her left sandal skidded on dusty calcite. A 6-inch rock chip broke free beneath her right foot. Nia told her to step back, but a new text from the campaign team appeared on the monitor. Claire held her position for the pan. Her torso tipped past 45 degrees and she went over the rim. She fell approximately 25 feet and struck a protruding ledge chest first, fracturing multiple ribs and severely contusing both lungs. She then plummeted an additional 65 feet into a shaded pour-off pool, hitting the water at an estimated 45 to 50 miles per hour. Witnesses observed brief agonal respirations as she surfaced, then watched her drift face down toward a rock shelf. Nia immediately called for emergency help. Eli descended a steep goat trail while a seasonal worker climbed down with a throw bag. Eli reached Claire first, found no carotid pulse, and began chest compressions. An automated external defibrillator arrived but advised no shock. CPR continued until an air ambulance landed. Claire was pronounced deceased at the scene. The medical examiner determined the cause of death to be blunt chest trauma followed by drowning due to aspiration. The scheduled giveaway was removed and monetization was disabled. The bonus payment was canceled. Land managers installed additional warning panels. A small cairn appeared roughly 30 feet back from the rim, placed by those who wanted to remember what happens when content deadlines override common sense. It was September 3rd, 2016, when 25-year-old Dustin Reynolds decided to film what he called the ultimate urban adrenaline teaser along an industrial rail corridor in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Dustin had built a modest following, documenting high-risk stunts in abandoned spaces and active transit zones, always chasing that next viral moment. This afternoon, he planned to capture footage of himself train surfing atop a moving boxcar. Dustin was bold and impulsive, the kind of creator who thrived on the edge and dismissed warnings as obstacles to content. He arrived with DeAndre, a 28-year-old transit worker who was pragmatic and understood the mechanical dangers of rail environments, and Lila, a 22-year-old aspiring videographer eager to capture dramatic footage. The weather was clear at 78 degrees, but the location was far from safe. The corridor was marked with no trespassing signs, and the tracks ahead passed beneath a low industrial bridge with an approximate clearance of about 20 feet, low enough that even a kneeling posture could prove fatal. DeAndre pointed out the overhead structure and strongly advised Dustin to stay flat against the roof. The initial plan was to remain prone to avoid clearance issues, but Dustin grew frustrated with how the footage looked and decided to kneel upright for a more dramatic visual. Dustin climbed the side ladder of a stationary boxcar and positioned himself near the center seam of the roof. Lila set up on a service path roughly 25 feet away. The train began moving, accelerating to between 35 and 40 miles per hour. Dustin transitioned from prone to a high kneel, raising his torso approximately 18 to 24 inches above the roof line. The low rail bridge loomed ahead faster than Dustin anticipated. A horn blast sounded from a nearby track worker. A passing delivery cyclist also shouted a warning. Dustin attempted to duck at the last moment, but his upper body remained well above the safe clearance profile. The bridge edge struck him directly in the head and upper neck with devastating force. He collapsed instantly onto the roof, his body going limp. The impact caused him to slide approximately 6 to 8 feet across the roof ballast before coming to rest. There was no purposeful movement afterward. Lila immediately called for emergency help. DeAndre sprinted along the service path searching for an access ladder. The train crew initiated an emergency stop, halting roughly 4/10 of a mile down the line. Crew members climbed onto the roof and found Dustin unresponsive with no breathing and no carotid pulse. One crew member began chest compressions, while another coordinated with dispatchers. Emergency medical services staged nearby, but were delayed due to rail safety protocols requiring track protection confirmation. Once cleared, paramedics ascended with a backboard and airway equipment. They attempted to secure an airway, but craniocervical disruption made it extremely difficult. Resuscitation continued as they moved Dustin down and transferred him to the ambulance. Despite prolonged efforts, Dustin was pronounced deceased shortly after. The medical examiner determined the cause of death to be catastrophic craniocervical blunt force trauma with high cervical spinal injury. The rail operator increased patrols and installed deterrent fencing at trespass hotspots. Lila provided footage to investigators. DeAndre submitted a technical statement on clearance hazards. Local advocates produced a rail trespass public service announcement using anonymized clips. The message was clear. Trains and their infrastructure are not playgrounds, and ignoring that reality can be immediate and irreversible. It was December 10th, 2017, when 26-year-old Spencer Rowe stepped onto a small stage at a pop-up food event space in Nashville, Tennessee, ready to live stream what he believed would be his most entertaining challenge yet. Spencer had built a loyal audience through eating challenges and food stunts that pushed the limits of speed and volume. This evening, he planned to tackle a timed steak and slider challenge with a live audience giveaway. Spencer was charismatic and competitive, feeding off crowd energy and never backing down. Joining him were Marco, a 34-year-old chef with little experience managing speed-eating safety risks, and Taryn, a 29-year-old event moderator skilled at hyping up crowds. Sitting in the audience was Owen, a 27-year-old student training to become an emergency medical responder. The venue was packed with 60 to 80 attendees. A basic first aid kit sat behind the stage, but there was no dedicated medical staff. The challenge consisted of dense bread and beef sliders and thick sirloin steak strips, with a strict 5-minute time limit. Taryn encouraged competitors to stack items together for visual impact and emphasized that cutting food into smaller bites would slow them down. A camera rig captured every angle, while a tablet displayed the live stream chat. The sliders were pre-assembled with dense buns that compressed easily. The timer started, and Spencer immediately began stacking his food. He combined 2 sliders with a 3 to 4 ounce steak strip, creating a towering bite roughly 2.5 to 3 inches tall. He took the oversized bite and attempted a rapid swallow. Almost immediately, his hand moved to his throat. He tried to cough, but the coughs were weak and ineffective. The universal choking signal was clear. Taryn called for help. Staff immediately dialed emergency services. Several audience members rushed forward, one attempting firm back slaps and another trying to hand him water. Frantic but ineffective responses typical in choking emergencies. Spencer tried to drink water, but the liquid refluxed visibly, indicating complete airway obstruction. Owen recognized the signs instantly and moved quickly to the stage. He positioned himself behind Spencer and delivered abdominal thrusts repeatedly, feeling slight movement but achieving no expulsion. Spencer's lips began to turn dusky blue. His knees buckled and he collapsed to the floor, completely unresponsive. Owen immediately began chest compressions and periodically checked the airway, but the obstruction remained lodged and unreachable. Emergency medical services arrived approximately 5 minutes later. A paramedic used a laryngoscope to visualize the airway and identified a compacted bread and meat bolus. Using Magill forceps, the paramedic extracted the obstruction. An advanced airway was placed, and multiple cycles of cardiopulmonary resuscitation were delivered. Despite these efforts, there was no return of spontaneous circulation. The live stream was terminated. Staff cleared the aisles and directed attendees outside. Spencer was transported to the hospital, where he was pronounced deceased shortly after arrival. The medical examiner determined the cause of death to be asphyxia from complete airway obstruction by a food bolus. Event organizers implemented sweeping changes, requiring mandatory bite-sized guidance, chew time rules, and on-site medical coverage. Marco shifted away from speed-based challenges, pivoting to exhibitions emphasizing technique and safety. The venue posted an emergency response flowchart and a memorial plaque. Spencer's death became a sobering reminder that entertainment should never come at the cost of basic safety. It was March 28, 2015, when 24-year-old Julia Hart climbed onto the rooftop of a former warehouse in downtown Los Angeles, California, determined to capture the perfect parkour sequence for her growing channel. Julia had spent 18 months documenting urban freerunning, building a dedicated audience that appreciated her technical skill and fearless approach. This afternoon, she planned to film a sequence featuring a 12-foot gap jump near vintage skylights. Julia was athletic and confident, known for precise movements and calculated risk-taking. Joining her were Priya, a 25-year-old photographer, Matteo, a 31-year-old building superintendent who was cautious, and Leo, a 22-year-old trainee freerunner. The weather was cool at 61 degrees, but light drizzle had begun to fall, leaving patches of slick tar across the rooftop. The skylights were original installations from the 1970s with visible crazing. More critically, they had no protective screens or guardrails. Matteo had been explicit in his warnings, telling the group to stay away from the glass entirely. Julia wore lightweight trainers and fingerless gloves. Tape marks indicated an 18-foot run-up. Leo had tested one skylight corner, and the panel had flexed noticeably. A faint cracking sound followed, but Leo brushed it off as surface noise, an ominous sign of internal stress in the aged acrylic. The plan was to vault near the frames without making contact with the glass. The first 2 takes went smoothly. Julia cleared the 12-foot gap cleanly both times. For the third take, she decided to add a mid-air twist. To achieve the rotation, she increased her approach speed. The wet conditions became a factor at the worst moment. As Julia planted her right foot for the final push-off, the slick tar reduced her traction. The foot slipped slightly, altering her trajectory by 8 to 12 inches. Instead of landing on solid roof deck, her left foot came down directly onto a skylight frame. The concentrated load transferred through the brittle acrylic panel beneath. The panel failed instantly. Julia fell feet first through the opening, dropping approximately 40 feet to the concrete floor below. She was impacted on her left side and back, producing severe thoracic trauma. The chest-mounted camera broke free. There was no movement after she landed. Priya immediately called for emergency help. Matteo ran to unlock the interior access door. Leo searched for an interior stairwell. When they reached the floor below, they found Julia lying motionless. Shallow respirations were present initially but diminished rapidly. Pulses became undetectable. Matteo began chest compressions following dispatcher instructions. An automated external defibrillator was retrieved, but had not arrived before paramedics reached the scene. Paramedics arrived within 7 minutes and immediately initiated advanced life support. A cardiac monitor showed brief electrical activity, but it was quickly lost. Despite aggressive resuscitation, there was no return of spontaneous circulation. Julia was pronounced deceased shortly after. The medical examiner determined the cause of death to be blunt force trauma with severe chest and spinal injuries from a fall through an unprotected roof opening. The building owner replaced all aging skylights and installed protective screens and guardrails. Rooftop access was restricted pending safety upgrades. The parkour community issued updated guidance, emphasizing the dangers of wet surface traction and avoiding rooftops with unprotected skylights. A memorial mural honoring Julia was painted on a nearby legal art wall. Julia's death underscored a harsh reality. No amount of talent can compensate for environmental hazards, and even calculated risks can turn fatal. It was July 22, 2018, when 27-year-old Cameron Blake arrived at a remote sandstone side canyon near Moab, Utah. ready to film a homemade zip line spanning approximately 220 feet across a canyon with a depth of roughly 120 feet. Cameron had built a modest following by documenting DIY outdoor projects and low-cost adventure setups that proved anyone could create their own backcountry thrills without expensive commercial operations. Cameron was enthusiastic and confident, priding himself on resourcefulness and self-reliance. He often downplayed risks in favor of making outdoor experiences accessible. Joining him were Rhea, a 29-year-old retail worker at an outdoor gear shop who was methodical and safety-conscious, and Trent, a 30-year-old hobbyist with some rigging experience who was overconfident and dismissive of redundancy protocols. A passing hiker in his mid-50s would later guide emergency responders. The temperature reached 91 degrees with only a light breeze. The sandstone edges showed visible weathering. The setup had not been professionally inspected, and no permit had been obtained. The gear consisted of an 11mm static line tensioned with a progress capture device, 2 webbing anchors with minimal edge protection, a steel trolley with a single attachment eye, a seat harness, and a single lanyard clipped using a non-locking carabiner. Static lines like that aren't designed to absorb dynamic shock loads, a dangerous oversight when used for human suspension. There was no backup attachment or secondary safety system. Rhea flagged multiple concerns during setup. She noticed a misthreaded harness strap and suggested adding a second anchor point for redundancy. Trent retightened the strap and dismissed the suggestion, insisting it would take too much time. The only test conducted was a single run using a 25-pound bag. No dynamic load test with human weight was performed. Cameras were positioned on both canyon rims. Cameron clipped his lanyard to the trolley eye using the non-locking carabiner with the gate facing outward. No tether keeper or secondary connector was used. He launched himself with a strong push. At midspan, the trolley hit a rough rope section, inducing oscillation and rotation. The non-locking carabiner rotated against the trolley eye. Under combined forces, the gate experienced flutter and levered open. Within seconds, the connector unclipped completely. The single-point attachment failed. Cameron fell approximately 110 to 120 feet to the canyon floor, impacting on sloped talus. There was no purposeful movement afterward. Rhea immediately called emergency services and relayed GPS coordinates. Trent stood frozen at the rim. The passing hiker quickly moved to guide responders. Rhea descended partway down a steep trail. When she reached a vantage point, she checked for breathing and pulse but detected neither. She marked the location with a bright sling. Search and rescue personnel arrived, documented the open non-locking carabiner and single-point failure, and conducted recovery using a litter and haul system. The medical examiner determined the cause of death to be multiple blunt force injuries from a fall after single-point detachment. The Land Management Agency issued a statement warning against unpermitted rigging, non-locking connectors in life support applications, and single-point attachment systems, emphasizing the importance of redundancy and proper edge protection. Rhea completed a formal rigging course and published a detailed pre-launch checklist. Trent stopped posting rigging content. A caution tag was installed at the trailhead referencing redundancy and locking connectors. Local search and rescue teams incorporated details into backcountry safety presentations. Cameron's death became a stark reminder that cutting corners on safety can have irreversible and fatal consequences. It was January 16, 2016, when 25-year-old Molly Patterson decided to live-stream what she called the ultimate winter hot tub experience. From her residential garage in Minneapolis, Minnesota, Molly had built a following by documenting creative DIY projects and unconventional lifestyle content. This evening, with temperatures at 19 degrees Fahrenheit, she planned to fill the bed of her pickup truck with water, heat it using a portable generator-powered pool heater, and stream the setup in real time. Molly was creative and spontaneous, prioritizing visual spectacle over logistical planning. Joining her were Danny, a 23-year-old neighbor who was practical, and Colin, a 25-year-old audio technician focused on production quality. The single-car garage measured approximately 240 square feet. Colin suggested closing the garage door completely to eliminate street noise and preserve warmth. Danny had mentioned noticing fumes when small engines were run in enclosed spaces, but the decision was made to prioritize audio clarity over ventilation. The setup included a 5,000-watt portable gasoline generator on the garage floor, a rubber hose running to a pool heater, multiple camera lights, and an electric space heater. Critically, the There was no carbon monoxide alarm installed. During a test run earlier, Molly had mentioned noticing fumes, but treated it as a minor inconvenience. The live stream began in the early evening. The generator started, the truck bed began filling, and the camera lights created a warm glow. The door remained fully closed. No visible smoke appeared, but a faint shimmer in the light beams hinted at exhaust accumulating near the ceiling. Unnoticed as Molly adjusted a light stand and continued narrating. As time passed, Molly's movement slowed noticeably. She leaned heavily on the truck rail, and her speech became slurred. Mid-sentence, her words stopped entirely. She sat down on a step stool, then slid to the garage floor. Shallow breathing was visible on camera, but she made no attempt to stand. The live stream chat filled with concerned comments about air quality. Colin re-entered the garage to adjust a microphone. Almost immediately, he appeared unsteady. Recognizing something was wrong, he cracked the side door partway before stepping outside. Danny arrived shortly after, saw the haze through a window, and immediately opened the side door fully. She dragged Molly toward the threshold and hit the generator kill switch. Emergency services were called immediately. The dispatcher instructed moving all occupants outside and ventilating the space. Paramedics arrived and found Molly unresponsive with no spontaneous respirations. High-flow oxygen was applied. A cardiac monitor showed pulseless electrical activity. Cardiopulmonary resuscitation was initiated and continued during transport. Despite aggressive resuscitation, Molly was pronounced deceased at the hospital. The medical examiner determined the cause of death to be carbon monoxide poisoning from generator exhaust in an enclosed space. Fire department personnel estimated carbon monoxide levels had exceeded 1,200 parts per million, a rapidly fatal concentration. The landlord installed hardwired carbon monoxide detectors and distributed flyers warning against running gasoline generators indoors. Colin recovered after oxygen therapy and posted a safety summary emphasizing the invisible nature of carbon monoxide. A local community center hosted a winter safety session referencing the incident. Molly's death became a sobering reminder that no content is worth risking lives, and that some dangers are silent, invisible, and absolutely unforgiving. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now